Hello and welcome to the third Starry Night video in our series. This one's titled Planning the First Night Out, in which we're going to plan what we're going to do when we go outside using Starry Night and set up the telescope. So what you're going to see in this video is we're going to come up with a list of objects that we want to visit using our own telescope. And what we're going to do is first visit them digitally or virtually using Starry Night to see where in the sky they are, and also sort of where, how we plan on, getting some points of reference to go looking for them. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually show you how we set up the telescope to prepare for our first night out to go looking for things in the sky to see how stars and planets actually move, from the perspective of how the wise men would have looked at them when trying to interpret the sky to figure out where Jesus was. So here we are, we're starting out looking for Polaris in the night sky. We're going to show you some tips on how to do that. So we're animating the sky to move it quickly to get it from our current time to about the time that we plan on observing, which will be about 8:48 at night, or about 8:30 when the sun goes down. At least the time of year we're making this video. You're going to have to negotiate that yourselves by using Starry Night. Now Starry Night gives you the ability to reverse time, so I'm actually reversing the time right now back to about sunset, or I can press the sunset and sunrise buttons to get to those times automatically. But obviously we want to get a little past sunset, and I'm looking west right now, so you can see the sun is gone and it's getting dark, and the Starry Night sort of simulates how dark it'll be. So 8:30 is looking like a good time to go out. And what we're going to do is the first star we're going to visit that was talked about in our previous videos was the pole star, Polaris. Now, it has the feature that it hangs sort of in the sky in the same place. It actually does move, but it moves in a tiny little circle, which you'll see here in a minute. But to the sort of untrained, or not so much untrained, but not particularly vigilant observer, Polaris, if you're really not paying very close attention to it, it appears to stay in the same place in the sky, much as the Star of Bethlehem would have if it were come to rest over the place where Jesus was born. So now we're going to take a closer look at it here, and we're also going to try to figure out how to find the Polaris in the night sky. So we're going to type in, it turns out the sky has a famous landmark sort of in a constellation that helps you find Polaris, and it's the Big Dipper. And what you can do with the Big Dipper is you can see, if you pay attention, it's got 4 bright stars that make the spoon, and a few bright stars that make the handle. So that's the shape of the Big Dipper. And the two stars at the end of the spoon part, the ladle part, pretty much point to Polaris. So that's a good way of finding Polaris. Polaris is a bright enough star to see with your eyes, but it's certainly not the brightest star in the sky. So it helps to have a landmark. And Starry Night's great with that, because you can put in names of constellations and it'll bring them up, and then kind of highlight them. And there's probably a way I could even connect the dots, but you wouldn't, of course, when you look at the sky, see connected dots. So it's better to see the Big Dipper more as he would actually be portrayed in the real sky here. So you can use the Big Dipper to verify that you're looking at pretty much due north. Is not quite, actually. That's the reason why Polaris goes in a little circle and not just literally stays in the same place. It's not actually directly over the axis of Earth's rotation. It's very close. So it acts as a pole star. So now we're going to zoom in on it and show, and you can see it actually is, when you look very closely at it, it is moving, but it's going to move in a circle. And that's sort of, so it doesn't move like a lot of the stars that are away from the pole. They move across the sky, kind of like the sun does. Polaris is going to only move in this little circle, and if you're not really zooming in on it or paying close attention to it, it would really appear visually like it's staying in the same place in the sky all the time. So There's other things about Polaris too. Turns out it's a binary star, but you can't really see the binary companion very well. And that's really all we're going to do with Polaris. Next, we're going to locate a moving star. And the moving star that I'm choosing to locate is going to be Vega. And Vega is a good star because it actually goes pretty much, at least where I live, pretty much overhead. But it's one of those things you can use Starry Night for, to locate stars that would act kind of like the Star of Bethlehem in a way. In not, of course, Vega doesn't. Vega doesn't come to rest, but during its travel over where I live, Vega at this time of year passes pretty much overhead. As you'd expect, if the Star of Bethlehem were overhead, you would be looking almost straight up to see it. We have to look pretty close to straight up to see Vega. And Vega is by far one of the brightest stars in the sky. In fact, it's a zero magnitude star, meaning that in these magnitude scale, it's like the reference. Zero magnitude is sort of what a star you compare all the other stars to calculate their brightness. Now, as I said, Vega is going to appear to be nearly directly over us. And so to find it, we're going to do the same kind of thing that we did. We're going to go back in time because we allowed a couple hours to pass there. So we're going to go back close to the beginning of our observing time to see where Vega is going to be. Now, obviously, if we're going to find Polaris first, that's going to take a little bit of time, chunk of time out of the evening. But it's hard to predict how long that's actually going to be. So I'm going to type Vega into the finder here, and Starry Night's going to take us up and over to Vega, which appears way up there compared to Polaris. So it's much closer to the top of the dome of the sky at this time of night anyway. It won't always be there because Vega doesn't come to rest over my house or over the land that I live. It will, once we're going to zoom in to show how Vega moves. But Vega, like any star, see, I'm still locked into it here, so I'm going to get Vega recentered here in time. I was zoomed in too far, so Vega like zoomed right out of my field of view here, but I'm going to bring back the field of view. And now the sky is moving the way it should. And you can see Vega, it moves along with the rest of the stars in the sky. If I'm paying close attention and willing to wait more than 30 seconds or a minute, I will notice that Vega will move. Now, what makes it hard to detect the motion when you're standing outside is that they're very small. The motion is very slow, and all the other stars are moving along with it. So it might appear to you, if you're not paying close attention, that the Vega was standing still. But we expect that the wise men would be some of the premier academics of their time and would be able to pay close attention. They've been paying very close attention to the motions of things. They'd be familiar with motions of stars and wouldn't claim that any star came to rest over somebody's house, especially if they went in to provide them presents, spend any time there. Certainly by the time they went out, they wouldn't expect that star to be over their house again, or to remain there if it was really a normal star. And the same is true of planets. We don't expect planets to stay in the same place, but we want you to be able to see that for yourself. So we're going to try to come up with a strategy to find a planet. Now, depending on where you live, planets and the time of year, and also not just the time of year, but where the planets are in their orbits, in their years around the sun. Planets can be all over the place. So we'll show you how we find sort of a process by which we chose a planet. Really, the strategy is that planets on the inner side of the sun, closer to us than the sun, are going to be close to the sun. So they're going to stay close to the sun, meaning they're only going to be visible when the sun sets and rises. And that's not really great for viewing with a telescope because you don't want to look anywhere close to the sun. Although Venus, you can see it with a telescope, but not not always, and it's certainly less reliable than the outer planets. So we're going to start with the outer planets when we go looking for planets to view with a telescope. So as I mentioned, and we're still looking at Vega here, but as I mentioned, we're going to try to come up with a plan to find planets using Starry Night. And we're going to start with the planets that are beyond Earth. So we're going to first look for Mars. And what we find when we search for Mars is it's really not visible this time of year nearly at the time that we're observing. So because Mars isn't visible, we'll go to the next one. We'll go to Jupiter. And the reasoning here is that, we're starting with the outer planet that's the least far out, so it'll be bright and easy to see if it were up. And of course, the further out you go, the harder are the planets to see. But Jupiter is up, and this time of year, where I'm living, it's you can see it's a kind of a really bright object, not too far from the rising full moon. But again, that just happens to be where I'm looking at Jupiter, from where I'm at this time, and where Jupiter happens to be at this time. So what you want to do is start from Mars and move out. If you can find Mars, that's best, and then if you can't, find Jupiter and then Saturn. And after Saturn, it's really hard to find planets. But now I'm focusing in on Jupiter, much as Galileo would have, and we're going to let time go on. As you can see, Jupiter does not stay put in the sky. And also, you notice Jupiter is pretty low. In fact, Jupiter, along with all the other planets, will always take the same course across the sky that the sun does. So the sun, for us in the northern hemisphere, only goes overhead sometime during the summer, like it will pass directly overhead of us. So given that, we're talking about we're talking about the Holy Land, the bottom line is that the Holy Land is in the northern hemisphere. You would not expect in the winter months the sun to be passing overhead. So the notion that the Star of Bethlehem was a planet or conjunction of planets that stayed stationary that even passed over somebody's house is not possible. It will, if at that time of year, it would only be passing over somebody's house in the southern hemisphere. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go over some steps on how to set up your telescope. We're going to look at the telescope mount, how to connect the camera, how to pair the remote shutter. So the telescope we bought comes with a Bluetooth device that connects to the camera to operate the camera shutter, or the ability to take pictures remotely. So you don't have to touch the camera, which you don't want to do. When you've got your telescope hooked up to a camera, you don't want to be touching the camera, or in our case, it's a phone camera. You don't want to be touching it because it touches the telescope and it makes it all wobbly and the pictures come out horribly. So we'll show you to pair the remote control shutter and then show you how the system works. All right, welcome to the Star of Bethlehem instructional video. This is Tobias, who's going to help us by doing the things with the telescope to set up for your first night out to observe things in the sky as part of our investigation of what the Star of Bethlehem could have been. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is we have a Geisker telescope. It's a small telescope we bought from Amazon, and Tobias is going to take the telescope and attach it to the tripod mount to begin with. So there's instructions on how to do this when you obviously buy the telescope, but we just thought we'd demo some of that. The telescope that we bought requires some assembly, so we're not going to do all that in the video. But attaching it to the mount is pretty easy. And then the next thing we're going to do is, before we set up the video, which like how to connect a video camera to the telescope, which we'll do in another video, we're going to, you're probably going to want to look through the telescope with an eyepiece. So the telescope comes with some eyepieces that you can just insert right into the barrel there. And so you put it in there, and there's an adjustment knob or a screw, the connection knob that helps you screw the eyepiece in. And with that done, we're going to locate the mount controls next. So the mount controls are used for moving the telescope down. Toby's going to show us how to move the telescope up and down with the vertical adjustment control. So the control just loosens the mount so that he can move it up and down and point it at an object that he could identify through the finder scope. So the finder scope is the small scope sitting on the right there, and so when Toby's looking up and down for something, he can turn that knob and then look up and down and determine, to find the thing. Now the finder scope is different than the telescope. It's a small telescope that has a wider field of view, so it can see more of the sky, but not in any great detail. So it allows Toby to see sort of the area of the sky that he's pointing the telescope at. All right, go ahead and lock the vertical control down by turning it to the right. And now he's going to show you how to turn the telescope left and right using the other mount control, which is on the side. So you unscrew that, and then you have the ability to rotate the telescope left and right. And that's really all there is. Once you have mastered those aspects of this small telescope, you can take the telescope outside and start looking at things. And we're going to get into next how to set up the camera so you can actually record what you're looking at. All right, the next thing we're going to do is attach the camera to the Gisker telescope. And the way we're going to do that is with this cell phone camera mount that they include with the telescope. So Toby's going to turn it around to show us what it looks like. And the way this works is you slide the camera into the mount, and then you have to line up. No, not into the. I'm sorry. Into the. You slide the phone into the camera mount, and then you have to line up this the eyepiece. So I put the eyepiece together. There's a separate eyepiece that I connected to the camera mount that the camera looks through. So go ahead and turn around to the screen and turn on the camera if you can. So find the camera app. You have to, yeah.
Camera app.
There it is.
There it is.
So what the camera's doing right now, it's looking through the eyepiece. And to do that, we had to line up the eyepiece with the camera lens on the back of the camera. So what Toby's going to do now is we're going to pair the Bluetooth remote control with the camera. So go to settings.
Settings.
There you go.
Where are settings?
You hit this button at the bottom. Go over to settings. You need to turn this way so we can see. Hit settings. There you go.
Go.
And there's your connections at the top. And then you hit Bluetooth. And you'll see devices. Oh, it's available devices are there. So what we're going to do first is turn on the remote so it sees the AV shutter. And now Toby's going to click on that. And we hit the pair. Now, the way that worked is he hit the AV shutter device, and I turned the remote on, which is right here. I turned the remote on, and which has a button on the side after he clicked the AV shutter on available devices. So I turned it on, saw it in the available devices list, turned it off, and then he clicked on it for pairing, and then I turned it on again. So it is complicated to get it to pair. Once it's paired, we can go back to the camera. So go ahead and hit that and find the camera app. The camera app should be there. There we go. And so now I'm going to show you how to take a picture. So here's the shutter, and there's two buttons here. One is for Apple, so that's the top button, and the bottom is for Android. And so when I took the button, it took a picture. So basically what the remote app allows us to do is make it so once we attach the camera to the to the telescope, we don't have to touch the camera, which will shake it and everything every time we want to take a picture. So what Toby's going to do now is going to insert the camera mount into the telescope by essentially what he's doing. He's taking off the eyepiece and putting in the camera where the eyepiece went. And he's tightening it all down. And now the camera is seen through the telescope. We can't see much during the day, but as you can see, here's the remote. We could take a picture now without touching the telescope. Now your telescope is already set up. As you can see, Tobias can go up to the eyepiece, to the viewfinder scope with his eyes, still even with the camera there, and look through it to some degree. So you're going to want to adjust the camera, maybe to even turn it around so it doesn't get in the way of people looking through the eyepiece. Yeah, like that. And then you have to tighten it down because you don't want the camera to move. Okay, good. Just let it go. Oh, it's so good. It goes down a little bit, but you can still see through the eyepiece. And so basically, now your telescope is all ready to go. It's got a camera mounted on it. And the one adjustment we didn't show you before was the focus adjustment, which is that knob on the bottom side of the telescope. It's right here. Adjusting this will adjust the telescope's focus so you can get a clear picture in the camera. And that's all there is to using the telescope. Next thing we're going to do is go out and start taking pictures and videos, because the camera gives us the ability, the cell phone camera gives us the ability to take video of things we see in the sky, so we can validate for ourselves on whether, what the wise men saw and prove it to other people. That's how science works. Now, of course, the wise men didn't have tools like this, but we're going to be able to go and show that stars really don't come to rest over our location, and planets don't come to rest, and they certainly don't go over any location, at least here, on the Earth. Only in certain times of the year would a planet go right overhead, and that certainly wouldn't be overhead in the winter in the northern hemisphere. So then that's when we're going to be viewing here. So in any case, that's what we're ready to do. When next time we get some good weather, we're going to use all the planning tools and the setup that we learned in this video, and we're going to go out and collect data to prove what can be proven. So this concludes our preparing to go out and take some data to back up some of the assertions we've made in some of these Star of Bethlehem exploratory studies. And we hope that they provide you with the sort of some tips and tricks that will make your first night out to go look at the stars with a telescope more enjoyable and profitable.